Good afternoon. Will the secretary please take roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblyman DeLong. Assemblywoman Duran. Assemblyman Gurr. Assemblywoman Hanson. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Urick. Chair Cohen.
Thank you, and I am here. Welcome to Assembly Natural Resources. Before we get started, some housekeeping. Please silent all electronic devices. Please note members of the committee will be using our laptops. Please don't take that as a sign of disrespect. Any exhibits should be provided to the committee the day before committee hearings at 12 o'clock. Also, you should be providing 15 copies for the public. We will have 2 bill hearings today and public comment. Before we do that, we do have a BDR introduction. So I am looking for a motion to introduce BDR number 48-338. So moved. Okay. I have a motion from the vice chair, and I have a second from Assembly Member DeLong. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, with that, the BDR is introduced, and we will move on to our first hearing on Assembly Bill number 20, which revises provisions related to water. And with that, I will ask Ms. Carr and Mr. Cooper to please come forward and go ahead when you're ready.
All right, good afternoon. Chairwoman Cohen, nice to see you. Vice Chair Anderson, it's good to be here, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Jennifer Carr, Administrator for the Division of Environmental Protection, or NDEP. I appreciate the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 20. This bill is designed to continue to improve access to our water and wastewater infrastructure financing programs and align it with our federal program elements, and provide some needed housekeeping because there are certain areas of these statutes that are in the bill today that are as much as 35 years old. For a little background, in the water arena, NDEP has state and federal water quality protection responsibilities across numerous program areas. The state of Nevada has our own laws and regulations, in addition to delegation of federal programs from US EPA under the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. Our staff proudly seek to achieve our mission to preserve and enhance the environment of the state in order to protect public health, sustain healthy ecosystems, and contribute to a vibrant economy. Part of NDEP's responsibility in water includes 3 primary infrastructure financing programs created in the 80s and 90s. The first is known as the Capital Improvements Grant Program, and it's from 1987, and it's funded by state bond sales when they're authorized by the legislature. The other water infrastructure financing programs at NDEP are the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, created in 1989, and the State Drinking Water Revolving Fund, created in 1997. These state revolving funds, or I'll refer to them as SRFs, are capitalized by the US EPA through grants. The programs have successfully distributed over $1 billion in loans and principal forgiveness funding since inception more than 30 years ago. I won't be covering them today, but there are maps that were distributed and are available to the public on the table over there that show the different distribution of funds, both geographically and financially, throughout the state. Last year, NDEP also began to receive funding for the first of 5 years through the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, which will further capitalize our SRFs in both clean water and drinking water. Nevada's water needs are ever-changing and require more innovative and robust approaches to managing our limited water resources. In both the Clean Water SRF and the Drinking Water SRF programs, changes have occurred at the federal level that now provide funding for innovative projects, but these new uses are beyond Nevada's current authority. Additionally, a more direct and efficient, streamlined approach is needed to manage project funding to ensure we maintain federal grants while providing fiscal resources to needed infrastructure projects. The Capital Improvements Grants Program in the Drinking Water SRF process projects through what's known as the Board for Financing Water Projects. The board is made up of 5 members appointed by the governor. 1 is to represent Clark County, 1 is to represent Washoe County, and the other 3 represent counties with populations less than 100,000. No more than 2 members may be from the same county. 1 member must be knowledgeable in the field of municipal finance, and the remaining members must be knowledgeable in the fields of planning and development of water resources. An NDP is staff to that board, and we hold an ex officio non-voting membership seat. That's a little bit of background. Now I'll walk you through AB 20 and draw your attention to specific sections or groups of sections that address common themes. Sections 4 through 14 expand eligible recipients and projects for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. The Clean Water SRF was created at a time when rivers were on fire and water bodies across the nation were contaminated with wastewater from domestic sewage and industry. The focus at the time was creating funding for construction of wastewater treatment plants. Nevada's current statutes limit eligible recipients of these funds to municipalities for construction of publicly owned treatment works. Municipalities is further defined and limited to entities having quote-unquote jurisdiction over sewage, industrial waste, or other waste, or Indian tribes or an authorized Indian tribal organization. So that's the definition of municipalities having jurisdiction over sewage. It was great at the beginning, but now the Clean Water SRF can do so much more at the federal level, and NDEP's program needs to catch up. The program changes to the definition of eligible recipient in Section 4, reference to the Federal Clean Water Act, so that as Congress continues to expand uses of these funds, Nevada can follow along more nimbly. Future project proponents that are not municipalities with jurisdiction over sewage would therefore be allowed to apply for infrastructure financing for new and more innovative types of projects provided by the Clean Water Act. If you're curious, examples in Nevada could include allowing a drinking water system, again under the Clean Water Act, to address protection of their surface water source by performing a non-point source or stormwater pollution control project. Drinking water systems could also be allowed to perform septic to sewer conversion projects that will recapture wastewater for reuse as a source of supply. We could assist agricultural entities in addressing agricultural best management practices that will help reduce water draw in groundwater hydrographic basins and surface water use. We could also assist conservation districts to install erosion control measures and perform reforestation or conduct proactive forest thinning to combat catastrophic wildfire in a watershed. Finally, another example would be to provide indirect funding to private homeowners through a financial institution pass-through that could help them to rehabilitate a failing septic system that could not be consolidated, or to assist with the cost of consolidation when a septic to sewer conversion project is underway. So that's the gist of the content of the policy that we're looking to change with AB 20. I would note that Section 11 of this bill is the section that triggers the 2/3 majority vote due to the expanded definition of eligible recipient. Section 11 and subsections 2 and 3 currently provide NDEP to impose and collect a fee from loan recipients, and that fee is set by regulation adopted by the State Environmental Commission. This fee is used to administer the program, and back in 1990, the SEC set that fee to 0.5% of the loan amount. The bill language does not change that amount or create any new fee, but proposes to expand the types of eligible entities to apply for loans. And therefore, the expansion of eligible recipients increases the potential for more loans to be dispersed, which would potentially result in the generation of more fees, and therefore the 2/3 majority vote requirement was assigned to the bill. Moving to sections 15 through 19. These expand the use of set-aside activities in the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. The Drinking Water SRF has several set-aside pots of funding that are defined percentages of the federal capitalization grants that can be used for specific purposes. Nevada places these funds in a separate account that has certain use limitations that are not restricted at the federal level. At the federal level, Drinking Water SRF program is allowed to provide loans and grants out of these set-aside funds that specifically fund projects for septic to sewer conversions, wellhead plugging and abandonment, and project planning for loan recipients. Project planning has been funded out of our loan program, but at a smaller scale, and it's also competing against actual construction project financing. Because of these limitations in Nevada's set-aside account, NDEP has not been able to move forward with projects in the drinking water program to address source water protection through septic to sewer conversions and wellhead plugging and abandonment. Now, historically, funding in the set-aside account has been supporting water system technical assistance, water operator training, and program administration. Expansion of the uses of the set-asides and proposed in AB 20 will not impact existing uses. Moving to sections 23 and 24. These will expand the use of the Capital Improvements Grants Program and address the constitution of the board. Current statutes have 11 eligible project types for this grant program, from drinking water infrastructure to water conservation improvements and irrigation infrastructure. Additions in AB 20 are to ensure Nevada is providing as many resources as possible to systems managing their limited water resources in a streamlined approach. Two specific additions are proposed. First, the current statutes allow the program to pay for costs associated with abandoning or decommissioning what's known as an individual sewage disposal system, or in layman's terms, a septic system. When that system is connected to a wastewater treatment plant, we can support those projects financially. However, current statutes allow for this only when NDEP requires the abandonment and connection and consolidation into a wastewater treatment plant. The proposed language would expand this eligibility to allow the program to provide financial support if NDEP approves a program or a project for the protection of groundwater quality that's developed by a state or local government. This addition would permit local governments to make local decisions about protecting groundwater resources and create eligibility for helping to cover those costs, even if the project is not required by NDEP. The second addition to in sections 23 and 24 provide for payment of costs to connect a well. Current statutes provide for payment of costs to connect a well to a municipal water system. And proposed language clarifies that the funding would also be provided for proper abandonment or plugging of a well when a property is connected to a water system. This supports groundwater quality protection through removal of the unused well. There is one other item addressed in section 23. At the beginning, you may have been wondering why I described the makeup of the board for financing water projects. One aspect that I didn't mention regarding the makeup pertains to political party affiliation of the board members. Section 23 of the bill proposes a change to the defined makeup of the board. Historically, there has been a requirement that not more than 3 voting members of the board may be of the same political party. We propose to remove this language. Approval of projects for funding is truly apolitical, and we made this proposal to reflect the apolitical nature of this body. We feel that diverse representation across geographic regions is really more important than political affiliation. And actually, in recent years, the required split has affected at least one board member's personal decision on their political party affiliation. Other aspects of the makeup of the board remain unchanged. Finally, AB 20 addresses a number of housekeeping issues. There are a number of other changes proposed throughout AB 20 that are intended to clean up outdated language in the operating statutes that just don't reflect current practice or are needed for efficiency and streamlining. I appreciate the opportunity to present AB 20 to you today. Jason Cooper, the Infrastructure Financing Program Manager, is with me today in case you have any questions that are hard for me. So, thank you.
Thank you both. We do have some questions. I first have one from Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this bill. This is really fascinating. So, obviously, you initially started talking about septic systems, which we've had some robust conversations about recently. So, I am curious. Well, first, I'm going to ask you, and you might be. How much money do you think, like, annually we're leaving on the table without not having this? But that's sort of my side question with the grants. And then will the, do the grants have to be requested by Nevada Environmental Protection Agency, or can like SNWA or something apply for grants, or they apply for a sub-grant from you? I'm just trying to understand how the breakdown.
Thank you very much for the question, Jennifer Carr, for the record. Through you, Chairwoman, to Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
And you can go directly.
Thank you. Could I ask a clarifying question? When you ask about the grants and making sure we're not leaving money on the table, are you talking about our capitalization grants where we bring money in? And then when you're asking about grants for like SNWA, are you talking about grants where we would be putting money out?
Thank you. I should have clarified that. Yeah, kind of two separate pots. So obviously, you're making these changes to NRS because we're clearly leaving money on the table with the feds, correct? And this will open us up to receiving more money, I believe.
So, yes, thank you for the question, Jennifer Carr, for the record. We are not currently leaving any money on the table, but what we are trying to do with the money that we have is use it to the fullest extent that the federal law provides. Because right now, we're simply limited in the types of projects that people want to do that are federally eligible, but they're not eligible because of state law.
Thank you for that clarification. And then my second question would be, so you're already getting the money, then an entity, a municipality would then come to you for like a sub-grant, or are you giving a loan? Because some of these are loans and some are grants, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Thank you again for the question, Jennifer Carr, for the record. Because there are 3 programs here, it certainly can be confusing, and it is to our borrowers sometimes as well, so you're not alone. The state revolving funds are generally loan programs, but the federal requirements do have certain percentages that we have to meet various program requirements, like principal forgiveness loans that we issue to disadvantaged or underserved communities. A principal forgiveness loan is simply a loan that you don't have to pay back, so it acts like a grant, but technically it's a loan. And then the capital improvements grants program, where we were talking about the ability to do septic to sewer conversions that a municipality would maybe want to pursue. Those, the capital improvements grants program is just grants that we utilize our state bonds for. Certainly.
I have a question from Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing forward the information. And there's always a map, so I'm always excited about maps. On Mylar, no less, right? My question actually has to do with Section 11 on page 6 of the bill, and you made it very clear as to the expansion of the loans as to what is why we have that 2/3 vote that will be necessary. I believe this is where I believe it's Section 11, yes. So with the expansion of so many more people applying, how many more do you anticipate that could be? Or are you planning on it or hoping for? Get out that the little magic ball.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the question. My name is Jason Cooper. I am the Administrative Service Officer that oversees the SRF programs and the Capital Improvement Grant Program in NDEP. The number of borrowers that we can expect from this expansion is unknown at this time. Our intent, of course, is to simply make sure that we are utilizing the funds to their fullest extent possible. The amount of money that the program collects in the service fee is closely monitored and balanced in the budget when we submit those pieces.
Follow up, if I may. Thank you. So the closely monitoring and everything, is that ever turned into IFC or to this body so that way we're aware of how much money is being utilized with that, with the closely monitoring of that budget? Or is that something that's simply kept within the department? I don't know if I made sense or not with that.
Thank you for the question, Jason Cooper, for the record. We actually include that with our budget submission to the governor that then gets transmitted to the legislature.
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming here today. I have a 2-part question, and I think my second question depends on the answer to the first, and if I may, Chair. So my first part is on the board. how long do the members serve, and what is the process for removing a member?
Thank you for the question. Jason Cooper for the record. The normal term is 4 years, and they are appointed at the pleasure of the governor. So we can receive a reappointment at any time. We can also receive an extension as well.
Thank you. And so, oops, that brings me to my follow-up question, which is with removing the political party requirement that it should be relatively evenly split, are you concerned at all that a new governor from a different party may rescind everybody that's on there and then place all of their party, and then the next time they may rescind all of those and then get the next party because there are no guide rails on the political party?
Thank you for the question. Jennifer Carr for the record. That's an angle that we hadn't considered. We've never experienced that in the history of the board, but I suppose it could be possible. Yeah.
Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate that question. I will say that I think I understand where some of the intent is coming from around that. I know that within this body, water expertise is not really limited by partisanship, and sometimes, we do have certain bodies that are limited by partisanship, but we have many that are not, so that we can make sure that we get the folks that have the relevant expertise involved in making those decisions. And while there is some substantial responsibility related to allocation of those funds, I think that sometimes we can run into, when we put too many requirements on things, getting the suite of experience that we need to make those decisions. So, but my question is, so you talked about some of the kind of new innovative opportunities. I know that there's been kind of probably over the last 15 years or so, a continued kind of expansion of potential applications for SRF, but that also depends on eligible entities bringing forward those projects for consideration into the portfolio. So I was just wondering if you can speak at all. I know it's tough because, again, you do provide some technical assistance, but are ultimately just kind of taking in and reviewing what you get. Can you share anything about supporting particularly some of the smaller entities in evaluating, for example, some of the watershed rehabilitation, or mitigating pollution, some of these other things? Could you just speak a little bit about maybe the challenges and opportunities to get folks to kind of go away from just the traditional drinking water or wastewater systems to look at some of these more innovative opportunities that might be out there?
Thank you, Assemblyman Watts. Jennifer Carr for the record. Jason's team does a fantastic job conducting outreach for the program, and as these eligible entities and project types change, then they're fantastic. They're out there constantly beating the bushes, out there doing workshops, virtual workshops, real workshops, meeting with communities, working with Nevada Rural Water Association, which is a real small system affiliation, and as a result of Assembly Bill, as a result of the bill money, there's also additional work that's being done in the area of small and disadvantaged communities or underserved communities, and as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law, our GIS staff have been looking at other metrics that can be used that Jason's team has been working on, that don't just solely look at median household income, but look at other metrics like the SNAP or the food stamp data or unemployment data, to try to layer those in a geographical information system so that we can start to make sure that we're turning over all the stones to look for potential projects. And then the types of projects, like you're talking about, Assemblyman Watts, go hand in hand with that outreach, because they are trying to get as many ideas and applicants in as they can. And so they're constantly seeding ideas. Like, you can do this and you can do that, and look at all this great new things you can do. So I think I think that the outreach that they do is pretty effective. So.
Thank you. I believe that. I've had the pleasure of receiving some updates and presentations from Mr. Cooper, and we have a lot of tremendous state employees, but the enthusiasm you bring towards the programs under your purview, it definitely shines through. So I am sure that we're doing the best job that we can to get the word out there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Have any other questions? Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that definition of eligible recipient. I tried to look up the USC sub 1381 and had some trouble with that. So can you just tell us who is that? Yeah, expand on that. Tell us who that's intending to capture. I mean, are we talking, could that be a private entity, or is that just going to be municipalities?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Jennifer Carr for the record. The Clean Water Act that you were doing your research on doesn't have a specific definition for eligible entity, and that's one of the reasons why this proposal in AB 20 directs the State Environmental Commission to then enact a regulation that defines it. And then that definition can change over time as eligible entities at the federal level continue to grow and expand. By not having a federal definition, states, EPA specifically is allowing states to be able to determine who's eligible. And so that's I think, a very effective way to allow us to be nimble, where we can react through regulation when the federal program changes. The examples of proposed eligible recipients that we anticipate will be part of the program would be counties, cities, towns, tribal governments, which are already part of the law, nonprofit organizations, water conservation districts, both public and private, irrigation districts, homeowners associations, both public and private, and educational institutions and districts, publicly and privately owned again. So we're looking at expanding the definition to include the variety of recipients that the federal regulations in 40 CFR provides.
Okay, thank you for that. Seeing no other questions, I think we will move on to support. So anyone in Las Vegas, in Carson City, please come forward for support. I don't see anyone in Las Vegas or Elko, but if there is anyone, please come forward. And in Carson City, just fill up the chairs as they become available.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and committee members. For the record, my name is Steve Walker. I am representing Douglas County today. Douglas County Board of County Commissioners voted unanimously to endorse AB 20. I also have some personal ties to this bill. I've worked on attempts to convert septic systems that were polluting groundwater with nitrates in Washoe, Douglas, and Lyon counties. I have not been successful because there was no funding, and conversions would cost homeowners $30,000 to $40,000. This bill on the septic tank conversion is very important to protecting groundwater in Nevada, very important. Additionally, I served on the board for financing water projects for 10 years. When I changed my political affiliation to nonpartisan, I lost my job. It had nothing to do with the fact that I had 40 years' experience working all over the state in water issues. So I think that taking that out of that bill is very important. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen, members of the committee. My name is Leo Drostoff, and I am here representing the Truckee Meadows Water Authority, or TUMWA. We also are in enthusiastic support for AB 20, and specifically the sections 4 through 14 that Administrator Carr spoke to. We would be an example of an entity that is now eligible to receive these, or at least compete for these projects, and we think it's very important that we're allowed to do so. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. John Flansburgh, City of Reno, Regional Infrastructure Administrator. I have served on the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission for over 13 years as a technical advisor to the Western Region Water Commission. We are also in support of this bill. I've been asked by the Reno City Council to develop options for them for septic to sewer conversions. We have a few areas in the city of Reno that are still on septic, and what that might look like. This bill would give us greater flexibility in how we might be able to administer those programs, and for that reason, I'm in favor and urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and committee members. My name is Kathy Flanagan, Flanagan, with the Las Vegas Valley Water District. Aligning Nevada's drinking water and wastewater programs with the federal programs gives the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection the flexibility to fund a variety of projects to address Nevada's highest priority needs. By approving this measure, more participants will be able to access funding if they choose to do so. And I emphasize the if, because that's where the 2/3 requirement comes in on this bill from the imposition of the administrative fee. I want to remind everyone that no one is forced to take out an SRF loan. However, if they choose to do so, then they should be required to share in the administrative costs, the review, the approval, and the administration of the contracts. An entity who uses SRF funding will benefit far more by the financial assistance than as compared to the nominal fee they would be charged. I urge your support of this measure. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and committee members. My name is Candace Townsend, and I represent the City of North Las Vegas. I am testifying in support of AB 20. We believe that by expanding the definition, it will increase participation in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which has provided funding for a wide range of water quality infrastructure projects in our state. We look forward to the continued success of the program and will continue our efforts to provide clean water to the residents of North Las Vegas, and we are happy to support AB 20. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Nicole Rourke representing the City of Henderson. We're here to echo the comments of support for AB 20. We're particularly happy to see the funding go to the septic system conversion. We think that this is an important measure along with other bills before this body that will work on that issue. And so we're here to thank you. There are very limited resources for that particular issue. So we think that's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. Jeff Rogan on behalf of Clark County. There's nothing more that I really can add that our local government partners have already said, but we too are very excited for the opportunity for residents of Southern Nevada to use funds like this in order to convert their septic systems to municipal sewer. It's very expensive for them to do so, and having any additional funding would be helpful in that regard. So we're very supportive of this bill, and we urge you to support it as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kyle Roerink, Executive Director of the Great Basin Water Network. Want to echo the comments of others, and I think it's a good bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Madam Chair, if you'll permit me, I would just like to compliment your committee. Wednesday is Bolo Tie Wednesday at the legislature. This committee is absolutely strong in the bolo tie game. It is amazing. It's bipartisan, men and women. It is a beautiful thing. So good job. I will just say I have a Me Too comment here in support of this bill. My name is Zach Bucher with the City of Las Vegas, here in support. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else in Carson City, BPS, if we can go to the phones, please.
If you would like to testify in support of AB 20, please press *9 now. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you, BPS. Okay, so we will go to opposition in Carson City. Anyone in opposition, please come forward. Seeing none, and seeing no one in Las Vegas or Elko. BPS, if we can go to the phones for opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition to AB 20, please press star 9 now. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral in Carson City? Okay, seeing none, and seeing no one in Elko or Las Vegas. BPS, if we can go to the phones for neutral, please.
If you would like to testify in neutral for AB 20, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify.
Okay, thank you. Administrator, would you like to come back up? Okay, Administrator's waving us off. So with that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill number 20 and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 91, which revises provisions governing water, and ask Assemblymember DeLong to make his way and go ahead when you're ready.
It is a different perspective from this side, that's for sure. Good afternoon, Madam. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and the members of the Assembly Natural Resources Committee. I am Richard DeLong, and I am the Assembly Member for District 26 in Washoe County. And I want to thank you for scheduling a hearing on this water-related bill. I am here today to introduce Assembly Bill 91, a bill seeking to provide the same regulatory relief to water right holders with wells on public land as those with wells on private land. Currently, a water right holder with a well on private land can drill a replacement well without having to go through the burdensome application process with the state engineer when their existing well fails. The goal here is to afford water right holders with wells on public lands the same regulatory relief. Thank you again for the privilege of presenting this today, and I will now walk through the particulars of the legislative language. Section 1 of the bill inserts the words public lands or on in subsection 1A and subsection 2. Section 2 of the bill has the act becoming effective on July 1 of 2023. With that, I would like to answer any questions. Sorry for being so verbose.
Committee, do we have any questions? Assemblymember Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, helps to have the microphone in front. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. Well, let's just cut to the chase. Could you give us some examples of where this would apply so we could have some real life scenarios where maybe this has been a problem in the past and this would help?
That's a great question. Chair, through you to the member.
Please go directly.
Thank you. A good example would be ranchers in rural Nevada have grazing allotments on public lands, and they commonly have stock watering wells to provide water within their allotments for their cattle or their sheep. If those wells collapse because of either corrosion of the casing or some other reason, they have to then apply to the state engineer and go through that application process to get authorization to put the replacement well in.
A follow-up? And how long does that process usually take?
There is no defined term in state law or regulation. It can be months, and the cattle need water quite quickly, particularly if it's in the middle of the summer.
Assemblymember Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm having a little hard time with this bill, and forgive me. So we're talking about grazing, and so that's an agreement that you go into on federal lands, primarily federal lands, I would imagine, in Nevada, BLM.
Rich DeLong, for the record. There is grazing on public land. Some grazing does occur on private land, but
Right, okay, but so specifically for this bill, we're talking about grazing on BLM land that you've gone into an agreement with BLM to have this grazing, and you have an active contract with the feds, correct?
correct.
Okay.
You'd be in allotment.
Okay, so who owns the well? Who owns the, currently? That would be,
The water right holder,
okay, which would be,
the rancher, or any other entity that has permission from the state engineer to drill a well.
okay. So the land, that's BLM land, the water right could be with the rancher has the grazing rights on the land?
Correct. This- Rich DeLong, for the record.
Okay. And so how long do wells usually last?
That's a good question. Rich DeLong, for the record. I don't have a precise answer for that, although I could talk to some of the drilling companies I know and get you that. But I know it can be a matter of years to decades, depending on water conditions and ground conditions.
And so the thought behind this bill is you have, I imagine, constituents who are coming to you and saying, our well has failed, we've gone to the state engineer, our cattle are dying of thirst because the state engineer is taking too long to get these. It just seems like a bit of an overreach for me. If you understand where, if there's a problem where it's taking that long for the state engineer when you have the grazing rights available, I think that's a problem with the state engineer's office, and that needs to be addressed. I don't know if changing NRS to, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around this, because I just feel like this is a bit of a slippery slope when we're talking about our public lands.
A great question. Rich DeLong, for the record. This bill is just trying to give equity between water right holders that have wells on public land versus private land. This bill is not trying to address any federal issues, which I think are beyond the scope of the Nevada statutes.
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking our questions tonight. So I do echo my colleague. I think there is a difference between private and public, right? On your private land, I understand you can do what you want on your private land. I do agree that I think some oversight on our public's lands is necessary. But I had some follow-up questions to my colleagues. So you mentioned ranchers. Who else would this apply to besides ranchers?
Thank you for the question. Rich DeLong, for the record. I think there are a couple of other users of water in rural Nevada that this could be applicable to. One might be farmers that have pivot irrigations. They may have their wells on public land adjacent to their private pivots. The other would be the mining industry, which commonly has wells on public land.
And Madam Chair, may I have a second? And this may be for the Division of Water, and I notice we have some staff members here for that, but I just wondered about how long it takes to approve these permits to get another well drilled.
Rich DeLong, for the record. I think it'd be best if NDWR answers their processing timeframes.
Thank you, Micheline Fairbank, Deputy Administrator with the Division of Water Resources. So our process when it comes to reviewing what we call it a notice of intent to drill, and that's generally what is filed in our office for a replacement well. So presently, the statute allows and our regulations allow a new well to be drilled without having to apply for an application to change the point of diversion if that new well is drilled within 300 feet of the existing well. And so the statute presently, on its face, is limited to, doesn't include the public lands aspect, which is what this legislation is seeking to do. The time period for us to do it is we generally try to turn those around within 3 days. Sometimes there's circumstances that may cause a longer period of time for us to do so. But generally, that's our objective, is to try to do that within 3 days. And part of that is we're looking as whether or not the water right's in good standing, the location, is the new location within that 300 feet. And then, sometimes also making sure that property ownership is consistent with the underlying water right.
Thank you. Just because you're up here, I have a question for you. Since obviously we have delineated between public and private lands before, are there any other delineations between water rights between public and private lands? Are there more processes to go through?
No, in this particular instance, these are existing water rights that are in essence, they should be in good standing. And so we don't treat them differently with respect to the administration of that water right based upon the ownership of the land, whether it's federal, state, or private government, any other governmental entity.
Assemblyman York.
Thank you, Chair. So with some of these questions, I just want to make sure that my understanding of this is correct. And that could be a yes or no at the end of this question. So it sounds like on private land, an individual could purchase a water right that gets vetted through the normal process, purchases the water right on private property. If for some reason that well fails, collapses, whatever, as long as a new well is dug within 300 feet of that existing well on private property, that private owner doesn't have to go through the entire process. They can just dig their well again. And then I'll finish. The challenge, it sounds like, same right, which we just heard, the same process, vetting process. It's a private water right. However, this is on public land. Because the statute doesn't address that, what you're trying to do is say the person with the private water right that they've paid for, been vetted on, the well just happens to be situated on public land, collapses, whatever reason needs to be replaced. As long as it's within that same distance, 300 feet, we just allow them to do that without having to go through that process again. Is that a correct understanding?
Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. Yes.
Assemblymember Considine.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this presentation. I'm just trying to get a little clarification because I know that we've said a replacement well, and then we're saying because it collapses or something happens to it, but I can't find what it means, what the requirements are to build a replacement well, or to bore or sink a replacement well. And the reason that I'm trying to find this out is the different, if you're on private property and it's 300 feet and you have a collapsed well, whatever the reason is, then you eventually cannot go beyond the borders of your private property. If the original well is 300 feet, now if you bore another one, does that then become the original well where you can go 300 feet beyond that one if that one collapses? Like, I'm trying to find, I guess, the borders, and I just don't see in the NRS where it says a replacement well is if it collapses, or if it does this, or is that more of an amorphous definition?
Rich DeLong, for the record. I'll start and then let NDWR finish off. The 300 feet is from the point of diversion, which does not change. So it's a constant 300 feet to address that. And then if you touch on the rest of that.
Micheline Fairbank. The regulations, we have administrative regulations in Chapter 534 of the Nevada Administrative Code that govern our well drilling regulations, and it provides the definitions. But generally, the cost to drill a replacement well is expensive. It's a substantial cost endeavor. So people aren't typically just willy-nilly replacing wells. There has to be some fundamental deficiency within that well that then either they're unable to withdraw the water either in the quantity or at the rate that they need to in order to support their beneficial use. And so that's really what we're looking at. It's not a test. We don't go out and inspect and say, oh, maybe you can jiggle this and it'll work just fine. It's an honor system, but it's also, there's a financial check on that kind of puts in those guardrails as well, in addition to our regulations.
Okay, and I just want to go back to that, Assemblymember DeLong. So the original spot is the original spot, so you're never going more than 300 feet from that original spot, correct? So, yes?
Assemblyman DeLong, for the record, yes.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember Watts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you discussed that this doesn't modify anything with respect to federal law. What are the responsibilities to the Federal Land Management Agency related to water developments on public lands? I understand that the waters of the state are managed by the state, but what are the responsibilities if you're going to sink a well and put a trough out for livestock, for example? What are the responsibilities to the Federal Land Management Agency?
Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. Assemblyman Watts, I can briefly touch on those. I don't want to go into a long discussion about BLM regulation, but it depends on the type of land use authorization. Whether it's for grazing, it would be an allotment management plan. It's between the BLM and the rancher. Might be a 2920 land use permit. It might be a plan of operations under 43 CFR 3809. It depends on the statute and the regulations that the use of the land is authorized by the BLM.
Thank you. So just to follow up on that, would there have to be some additional notification or other revision or process undertaken with a land management agency? It sounds like there, again, with the wide scope of potential water right users this could apply to, there might be a lot of different agreements with the Federal Land Management Agency. So the question I'm getting to is, would there still be requirements depending on the scenario to either notify the Federal Land Management Agency or go through some process to gain approval to modify the location of a water development?
Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. It would, in my mind, it would depend on the scope of the authorization from the BLM, but I would think that there would be, but it depends on the scope of their authorization.
Okay, so sounds like it depends, but in some cases, yes, and so that process would still exist regardless of this. Madam Chair, may I have one more? Did you discuss with the agency, given the ideal timelines for processing these and the historic underinvestment in our state's Division of Water Resources, increasing staff in our Water Rights Division to make sure that we're able to process these on an adequate timeline instead of seeking to change the existing NRS?
Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. As a freshman, I did not want to get into putting in a bill that would increase staffing in any agency, so no, I did not do that.
All right, I'll work on that for you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for a second go-around. Actually, just a little bit of information. When we talked about the cost of a well being a check on willy-nilly well drilling, in 2000 and, I think it was around 2003 or 4, we had to re-drill our well for our property in Spanish Springs for our home, and that was only 125 feet, and it was $42,000. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea, and then adjust for inflation. Also, that stock water wildlife on the public lands benefits by the stock water use too. Thank you.
Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, I have another question, but my question is, if the original well is on private land and within 300 feet of that well is public land, under this law, would they be allowed to drill on public land without applying for this permit?
Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. That's a good question. I don't know that I have a legal answer for that. If you're going to go do something on public land that you didn't have a previous authorization for, you would need to get that. So I know from a federal side, you'd have to do something, but I would think it would apply, but NDWR might be a better one to address the specifics of your question.
We're going to try, she's drafting, but we'll see if we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. If you want an answer from the research side, Nick Anthony, not legal counsel, but the way it's written, the original site of the well and the site of the replacement well are on public lands or on property owned. If you wanted to further clarify, certainly that amendment could be made.
All right. All right, so I've got a question. I've just got a question about aquifers. So is there a chance if you go 300 feet away, I mean, you could be in a different aquifer, right? And you could end up in the water of a senior rights holder's water, couldn't you?
Assemblyman DeLong, for the record, without knowing the specifics of a given location, it's hard to tell, but there's always the possibility of that being the case.
Okay, and then would the state have an obligation if you go into someone else's a senior rights holder's water?
I would rather that NDWR address how they deal with concerns between water right holders.
Micheline Fairbank for the record. So when it comes to looking at the replacement wells, if the replacement well, in theory, it should not create a new conflict with an existing right. Certainly there's opportunities or possibilities where there could, if you're moving closer to an existing well, domestic well or something of that nature, and if it's a large irrigation pump, something like that could create a conflict. But that can transpire on public or private lands as well. The concern about moving into a different aquifer is previously the way our agency functioned was we wouldn't allow the movement beyond 300 or within that 300 feet if it stepped that new point of diversion outside of the quarter. So we look at things in township and range and meets and bounds. And so if it was crossing that quarter line, we wouldn't allow that new well to be replaced in that location. And so that was what originated this change to the legislation. I believe it was in 2019. So this is just kind of an evolution of that. What won't happen is if a well is being moved 300 feet and it would move it outside of that basin boundary. So we look at our hydrographic basins, and there's places in the state that the boundary between two separate basins is hardly discernible. We wouldn't move that water right into a new basin because that would kind of be a fundamental change, and so we'd have a whole different process for accomplishing that. But for just the replacement well, we're looking within the basin 300 feet. We no longer adhere to it having to remain within the same quarter. And that same would apply now to those wells located on public lands.
And then while you're up there, do we have to worry about, so while we have these, if the new well is on public land, do we have to worry about any issues with someone coming along and using it, if there's any quality issues, anything like that with the well?
So our purpose is we're really just, we're regulating the diversion of the water, whether or not they've satisfied their statutory criteria in order to have an appropriative right, or, if they have a claim of vested right. And then for the replacement well, are they going through the appropriate statutory and regulatory criteria for the drilling of that replacement well? In terms of those other concerns and uses, that's really, when we think about whether or not they have authority to do it on the private lands, those are all parts of the agreement with the public landholders or whoever that landholder is. As Assemblyman DeLong articulated, we have existing wells throughout the state on public lands, and whether or not what they do with them, vandalism happens everywhere, but that's not really our regulatory lane. It's really the well owner's responsibility to maintain the service of their well.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we have, Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you. Given your last statement, I'm curious to know, would you even know if somebody was going to move it if they did not? This says the person is not required to file an application to change the place of diversion. Would you know if they were even going to do it at this point?
So the well drillers are licensed, and so the well driller who would be performing the work has their obligations in order to maintain their well driller's license, and there's penalties if they do things in violation, and filing that notice of intent to drill is one of those criteria, and that could result in penalties or disciplinary action against the well driller. So in our experience, well drillers are historically very forthright. And make sure that they're doing the right thing, and so that helps also keep water right owners honest.
Okay, seeing no, and thank you for coming up. Seeing no other questions, hold on, let me just double check, that's no other questions. Okay, seeing no other questions, we will move on to support. So we'll just ask everyone in Carson City to just come up and fill in the chairs as they open up. And you are limited to 2 minutes. So please go ahead.
Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau. Water developments provide significant contributions to effective livestock grazing on federally managed lands. Through the distribution of livestock across grazing permits by way of privately owned and maintained water resources, range conditions are improved and its benefit to everyone. We support AB 91 as part of this principle. When a livestock water well is in need of replacement, the ability to re-drill a replacement well within the guidelines outlined in AB 91 should be allowed. We appreciate Assemblyman DeLong bringing this bill forward and strongly encourage your support for passage of AB 91.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm Davey Sticks, member of the Nevada Cattlemen's Association, rancher and owner of both private wells and wells on public grazing. And I just wanted to say, I think the issue of the need to do this, I think everybody's okay with that. When you have a catastrophic collapse, we can't wait for Monday for the office to open. We need to get it done right away. The cattle, just like any livestock, cannot go without. But a couple answers to some of these questions. One is you can't have a grazing permit without having a bona fide water source.
The agency's not going to issue you a grazing permit unless you have water, whether it be a stream, whether it be a well, or whether it be a spring. You have to have it. So the approval should be there. If it's not, then that's up to the agency. Some of our permits that we own have been owned for several years or, several decades. So I just wanted to make that straight. And on a private ground, if you had a well and you wanted to go 300 feet, boy, I would avoid going onto that public grazing area. I would do it on private because you don't have the approval and it's going to take a long time. So I just wanted to straighten that out. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Shannon McDaniel. I'm a licensed professional engineer and a licensed Nevada water rights surveyor. I previously worked for the Nevada Division of Water Resources for 9 years, leaving as the chief of the well drilling regulations and adjudication sections. I currently work as a water rights manager for Resource Concepts, Inc. In 2022, I was a Democratic candidate for Assembly District 40. My platform focused on the resources with the intent of AB 91 being one focal piece. I am here today representing myself to testify in favor of AB 91. AB 91 is seeking to clarify language introduced during the 2019 session by Senators Goycochea and Brooks. SB 236 was passed, allowing owners of a water right to drill a replacement well if the replacement well is within 300 feet of the point of diversion as described in their permit, provided they also own the land on which that well is located. As written, this language excluded owners of wells located on public land and creates a disparity in how well owners are treated depending on whether their well is located on public or private land. The language passed in SB 236 forces owners of water rights on public land to file applications to change the point of diversion rather than being able to drill a replacement well within 300 feet. This creates an undue burden on the water right owner and subsequently increases division staff time to work through the change application process. AB 91 is introduced, extends the ability to drill a replacement well within 300 feet to legal owners of water rights having wells on public land, and will put them on equal footing as people on private land. AB 91 does not allow the migration of that well outside of 300 feet from the original point of diversion. This small change will assist the Nevada Division of Water Resources by reducing the time and resources expended processing extraneous applications. It will provide equality for all well owners, and it will help licensed Nevada well drillers comply with the statute. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Annalise Porter with the Southern Nevada Water Authority. We are supportive of this measure. Thanks for hearing the bill.
Wade Polson from Lincoln County Water District, General Manager. We have several wells, water production wells in our projects currently in Lincoln County, and a vast majority of them are on public lands. If something was to happen with those wells, we would like the opportunity to be able to move 300 feet and be able to drill another well. And it is expensive to drill these deep wells. We also agree with the fact that this brings public lands as well as private lands into coherence with the law of water, so that the public lands are not excluded. There are right-of-ways that we have to provide and get from the BLM to be able to drill these wells, and we have done that, and we have those right-of-ways that have been gifted to Lincoln County Water District. Thank you, and we urge you to support this bill, AB 91. Thank you.
For the record, Steve Walker representing Eureka County. Eureka County is in full support of AB 91.
Okay, not seeing anyone else in Carson City or in Las Vegas or Elko. BPS, we'll go to the phones, please.
If you would like to testify in support of AB 91, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hello, I am Casey Rogers for the record. I am just giving my support for this bill, AB 91. I feel like it's discriminatory to say that private people can, but public people cannot drill wells. So I am in full support of our ranchers, of our farmers, and definitely like that cow meat. So please keep them watered well, and you have my full support. Thank you very much.
PPS, any other
Chair,
call?
there are no other callers.
Thank you. Okay, coming back to Carson City, anyone in opposition?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Patrick Donnelly with the Center for Biological Diversity. We are opposed to this bill. I would actually say that the law that this bill is trying to emulate is extremely flawed, and so the wrong move would be to now apply it to public land. When you move a well, you're supposed to file a change application, a change in the point of diversion, and the state engineer should evaluate that for conflicts with existing water rights, conflicts with protectable interests in domestic wells, and detriment to the public interest, which includes the environment. Under existing law, moving the well 300 feet is not subject to analysis under those terms because the state engineer is not given discretion on that move. So then applying that to public land kind of makes this problem worse because then you're applying it to a much broader swath of area. And 300 feet, you begin creating a cone of depression where that pumping is occurring. And if you move 300 feet, you're moving that cone of depression as well. You may be moving it closer to a spring or to a wetland or to someone else's well. And there could be detrimental impacts to those resources. And without the state engineer having discretion to analyze that and then render a decision, we are then going to be operating without full information and without full evaluation of the potential impacts of that move. So we do oppose this bill, and thank you.
Hello, Will Adler with Silver State Government Relations, representing the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. Pyramid Lake would like to first kind of thank Member DeLong for bringing this measure forward because we understand the need to have some, flexibility when it comes to well choice and placements, but also want to bring forth some concerns because the nature of tribal lands and sort of the continued conflicts we have around our own borders is frequently around tribal lands you'll see this checkerboard pattern that is sort of a private-public checkerboard that we frequently have seen folks that have a little corner of a checkerboard that do place a well there right on the edge of land, and then if they could jump it over to the other side of that checkerboard now, it does create sort of a concern of putting our arms around where these would be allowable, where this movement could be allowed, and then just in general, at any time there's a lack of notice or communication when it comes to a new well being drilled, that is tough for the tribe to take in its entirety. But at this time, the base policy is when we run into a well that ends up being a conflict or one that has issues with the tribe, or they drilled at a bit of an angle to try and get at that spring at a little bit closer distance, it's usually the hardest thing is to move a well that's already there, but it's actually easier to stop one that never gets placed in the first place. So just on those concerns and just the baseboard of having that checkerboard around tribal reservations, we have to file an opposition. Thank you.
Seeing no other opposition in Carson City and seeing no one in Elko or Las Vegas, we'll go to the phones, please.
If you would like to testify in opposition to AB 91, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify.
Thank you. With that, we will go to neutral in Carson City. Seeing none and seeing the rooms empty in Elko and Las Vegas, BPS will go to the phones for neutral.
If you would like to testify in neutral for AB 91, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify.
Thank you, BPS. Please go ahead, Assemblyman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rich DeLong for the record. I just want to say thank you to the chair, vice chair, and the committee for the opportunity to go through my first hearing on a bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. With that, we will close out the hearing on Assembly Bill number 91, and we will move on to public comment. Do we have anyone for public comment in Carson City? Okay, seeing none and seeing no one in Elko or Las Vegas, we'll go to the phones, please, BPS. And remind anyone for public comment that it is related to the purview of the committee, but not the bills that have been heard today, and that it will be limited to 2 minutes per person.
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cyrus, C-Y-R-U-S. I just came back from a trip from New York City, and there was just a lot of great things I just wanted to share. And since this committee has to do with natural resources, it's important to know that the lifestyle that people live out there, and I checked out all the sites, has far less impact on the environment per person than a typical lifestyle of a person in Las Vegas. The mass transit compared to here is phenomenal. It's just, you can go nearly everywhere you can go in Manhattan. And now many of you are going to say, well, we don't want to live in super tall buildings. Well, if you go to Queens, you will find that there are many detached homes. And some neighborhoods have about half of their housing stock. And many of them reuse the same floor plans, but they stand out differently. A lot of those neighborhoods have more beautiful charm in them, but they use more transit a lot more than we do. And I beg to ask myself, why? What has changed? The solution is not to stop growth on the outskirts. It's to remove the land use regulations that make development that we used to see in the old cities illegal. Because then, if you are allowed to build something more old-fashioned, you can get areas that attract pedestrian and transit life. Now, unfortunately, I want these transit projects to be more cost-effective like the good old days. I don't want them to be over budget and delayed. That's another thing we have to start working on. So doesn't it ever come to you, you go to these old cities, and aren't you ashamed how Las Vegas overall has among the worst policies when it comes to land use, transportation, and architecture? The transformed Clark County has been updated, and a lot of things have not improved.
And you're at 2 minutes, if
Think
you can
about
wrap it up, please.
Thank you for my time, and please have some second thoughts.
BPS, next person for public comment, please.
Chair, there are no additional callers at this time.
Okay, committee, anyone have any comments? Happy birthday, Cheryl. Yay. Okay, no. And your birthday present is we are not singing. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.